New Gods of Remnant by Neon Sanketsu, Chapter 6, Reasons to Destroy. It is my firm belief, unpopular though it may be in this given climate, that these individuals are not gods. They are powerful to be sure, but not deities. I have not the opportunity to study each of them in turn. They allowed it. I suspect they are bemused by my line of inquiry. In my brief time with them, I have come to know them. One favors mercy, another believes in power. One trusts to tricks and mischief, hiding his true face behind many masks, metaphorical and otherwise. Others believe only in the strength of her fists. She reshapes the very lands with her strikes, regardless of their origins or how they came to be. Remnant is their home. They will protect their home at any cost. The thought often troubles me. A future excerpt from one Dr. Ublik, Reasons to Destroy. Ah, civilization. Naruto rolled his eyes. At least someone's happy about it. Maria swatted him on the arm. Oh, hush, and let me have this. Sweet terra firma. He couldn't quite keep the smile from his face. Maria was rarely the sort to smile like this. He'd let her have her moment, even if he wasn't quite comfortable with this. After so many days spent in the wilderness living off the land, it was strange to be in a city. Not unpleasant, mind you, but strange. He'd grown used to a simple life and simple fare, to a small group of people he trusted. To suddenly find that turned on its head was... well, it was a bit of a lurch, and frankly, he was still adjusting to it all. Ugh, wake me when it's over. A lucky bastard. At least Kurama could just sleep through this. Mount Glen wasn't half as large as the city of Vale. Yet he still found himself taken aback by the sheer scope. They weren't even in the city proper yet. They take the train from here through the tunnels to reach the main city, and from here, Maria's home. Simple. No, it really wasn't. Not at all. Sprawling streets lay before them, wider than he could reach. Vendors hawked their wares as men and women carried construction material to and fro. Tantalizing scents flooded his nose, cooked meat mingling with the sweet tang of unfamiliar fruits and other stranger aromas he couldn't place. The people here were thriving, happy, eager for the chance to be heard. Honestly, all this noise made Naruto want to run and find a nice, quiet place, but he couldn't. He was efficiently held captive. No force on Remnant could hold him, yet he found himself bound all the same. Really, he should have expected this. As the youngest, Tak had long since grown tired of walking and laid claim to his back hours ago. She'd since fallen asleep. Even now, she dozed pleasantly against his neck, drilling into his shoulder. He thought it was a weakness. He'd need to wash his shirt after this, and the cloak besides. Another man would have thought it a weakness, not him. Maria was more than capable of protecting herself. Given time, Little Talk and the rest would be able to do the same. Now, if only Summer and Glinda would stop giving him the silent treatment. Alas, the blonde had barely spoken so much as a sentence since they'd plucked her from that ruined village, but that didn't mean she was ungrateful. Glinda hadn't let go of his right hand since. Even now that they'd finally reached the city, she remained reluctant to release him. At least she wasn't calling him Papa. He didn't think his heart could take another shock like that since they reached Vale. Of course, that meant Summer just had to latch onto the other. What was he? A chew toy? One couldn't blame her, really. She had only just reconsoled herself to the idea of forgiving Tak for her past crimes, only for a third interloper to come along. Poor girl. He caught Summer glaring at Glinda and gave her a nudge. Be nice. She puffed out her cheeks and looked away. Sorry. Such a daddy's girl. Oh, look this way. Of course, Maria found it adorable and kept snapping pictures of all the while. So cute. Naruto swore vengeance for all of it. Long, bloody vengeance. Surely the others were having better luck than he. A distant rumble caught his ear. He paused, frowned, and cocked his head. What's that sound? He soon had his answer. Ahead of them, someone screamed, Grim in the city! Kali was a simple girl with simple needs. Food, water, warmth, happiness, protection. Really, that was the best you could hope for in a place like Menagerie. Their islet wasn't lawless by any means. but neither were its laws enforced by as strictly as they could be at that. Killing was frowned upon, of course, as were other things, but for the most part, the chieftain let the people do as they pleased, so long as they kept peace. You could steal food if you were quick or persuasive. Maybe if a merchant took pity on you. If someone attacked you, you had every right to defend yourself. You could even fish. You could even fish someone attacked. You could even fish for your supper yourself if you were the patient sort. Menagerie had plenty of fish. And plenty of fish. Conversely, you were free to leave the island at any time, provided you had enough coin to pay for passage. Few ever took that option, not with the memory of the Faunus War still so fresh in everyone's minds. Some, like old man Taurus, were all for the idea of another war. Many weren't. Like many orphans before her, Callie banded together with other children to survive, strength in numbers, that sort of thing. That was how she met Gira. It had been a decent life, not good, not bad, just decent. Until their goddess came, she who had come to Menagerie in their time of greatest need, she who had healed their sick and treated the wounded, she who heard their pleas and turned no one away. She was so humble and kind, insisting she wasn't a goddess, just the sort of thing a god would say, even if said goddess insisted otherwise, and she got to be her first priestess. If life was good, if their goddess wanted peace, of course, everyone did, but unlike most, she wasn't above giving someone a good smack if they got uppity. She believed in fairness and equality for all. She healed any who came to her doorstep, and none were left wanting. There was even talk of a group dedicated to her grand vision. Names were bandied about, but the White Fang seemed to be a popular one. Such talks were still in their infancy, of course, but they were taking root. If humanity wouldn't learn their lesson from the last war, maybe it was time to speak out, time to make themselves heard. Content in her beliefs, Callie watched the battleship steam into their harbor. She smiled, ears twitching in thinly veiled delight as their vessel crept closer. Let the dog of Atlas come. Menagerie had a goddess on their side, but what had Atlas brought? A ship? A few soldiers? Ha! They were idiots and would be dispatched like the fools they were. The little fauness sat down, tucked her knees into her chest, and settled in to watch the show that followed. And what a show it was! Within minutes, she laughed herself absolutely breathless. Hey, Gira, did you see that? That guy flew. This would change everything. Sakura found reinforcements soon enough. If anything, the warriors of Menagerie found her. She'd only just steered young Tyrion away from the beachhead when they were met by a squad of 5 soldiers, 1 man and 3 women. Each looked as alarmed as she felt. The tallest of them saw her and hastened to her side with a cry, not one of warning, such would imply this lot feared her. They did not. In truth, she would have preferred fear over this naked reverence. Fear she knew she could counter, not this blind worship. Speaking of which, surely they weren't going to... Nope, they were. She'd be a fool to expect otherwise. There she is. She caught a flash of pearly white teeth in his smile. Do you see? Did I not tell you she would be here? Oh no, not this again. Sakura opened her mouth to forestall disaster. Too late. The leader knelt and as one. His teammates mirrored him to a fault. Damn it, Duncan! A snow flush crawled upon the back of the Kunoichi's neck and crawled across her pale face. Must you do that every time? Behind her, Tyrion mirrored, no doubt seeking to emulate them. Shame seared her cheeks. It was too much. Get up, blast you! She gently yet firmly tugged the boy up by the wrist and shot the barely glare over her shoulder. I already told you I don't want anyone kneeling. Not to me. Forgive us, goddess. We are simply glad to see you safe. Atlas is... Yes, I saw the ship. She couldn't even reprimand them properly. They were so damn earnest about everything. They meant well, too. Ugh, this lot was worse than Kali. Stand up already. We don't have time for this. There's work to be done. Yes, my goddess. He bolted to his feet and stood at attention beneath her gaze. What is your will? They were all looking at her for answers. Even little Tyrion. Sakura groaned. Pink. Her face was pink, just like her hair. She wanted to die. It is my will. She waved a tight fist before her face. That you call me by my name. Tyrion tittered merely. Duncan Torres was not an unhandsome fellow. He reminded her of Sasuke, albeit louder and more earnest. The resemblance ended there. Clad in a long dark leather grabsan with matching boots and gloves, he was a great big bull of a swordsman with piercing silver eyes set in a passionate face. His startling dark hair was threaded with premature streaks of gray, and much like his namesake, he bore a pair of sleek, curved crimson horns well above his brow. She never asked about after his age. It seemed impolite, but she hazarded it was somewhere in the late 30s at best, early 40s at worst. His brow furrowed, but he didn't refuse her command. As you wish. Somehow she doubted he would do that. Still, Duncan was undoubtedly a capable warrior. She'd seen him wield his semblance, use family blade with an ease that bordered on the supernatural. In terms of swordsmanship alone, he was unmatched, and as such had no shortage of admirers for his skill. In years to come, she had suspected this man would have many children and grandchildren someday. He'd sworn to name his firstborn after her. No, thank you. Still, that was a matter for another time. For now, there was work to be done. Sakura pinched the bridge of her nose. Just follow me, damn it. The bull and fawners favored her with a grim grin that reminded her of someone else. Gladly. In short order, a band of able-bodied men and women were assembled to bolster Duncan's squad. Together they gathered at the docks. It was impossible to keep the children and civilians back now. Likewise, any attempt to disperse them would prove fruitless. She shooed a tittering Tyrion their way and hoped for the best. Everyone would be watching now, and she could only hope that she wouldn't make an arse of herself. Please, she begged whatever higher power looked out there, at least leave my pride here. Sakura willed herself to breathe and reminded her oath as the ship crept closer, a dark shimmering silhouette against the setting sun. With each breath, she felt her heart hammer. A healer must do no harm, and if they must, they should do so gladly. She didn't enjoy hurting others. She took no pleasure in it. She wouldn't fight if it could be avoided. Oh, she could crack skulls and break bones with the best of them. Make no mistake, but she wouldn't do so unless someone provoked her. But this felt like a provocation. The battleship, for it could be called nothing else, was a long and elegant thing, all gunmetal, grey and white, which she would soon learn to be the colors of Atlas. It steamed into their harbor at an agonizingly slow pace. Its sleek curved hull steamed plowed through the waters until at last it reached the point of no return. Now it could come no closer for risk of beaching itself. Sakura dared to hope that might be the end of it, that those aboard may yet realize they weren't welcome here and simply turn back. It would spare her a great deal of delegation, and Sage knew what else. Cowards, Duncan scoffed as he touched one hand to the hilt of his katana. They would be wise to flee. Sakura pursed her lips at the thought. And if they don't? A rare smile crossed his scarred visage. In any case, it wasn't to be. As she looked on a small motorboat detached from the vessel's side, tiny specks filled it, and with a roar of an engine, it was underway. Not right. Letting those bastards come here, someone muttered behind her. Sakura never knew who. Aye, someone seconded. I should blast it out of the water. They do the same to us. She rounded on them with burning eyes. Absolutely not. As one, they quieted, just as well too, because their guest arrived not a moment later. Their vessel was swiftly moored to the dock, and they disembarked. They were certainly a grim-looking bunch in all that blue and white armor. 12 soldiers, 6 to each side, advanced in lockstep towards them before halting abruptly. As one, they stepped back and parted ranks to reveal their commander, a rather round fellow with a pale, pudgy face, cobalt eyes, and a pale receding hairline, clad in a wide greatcoat with fancy epaulets and brass buttons that strained sorely against his gut. He hardly looked the part of an officer. Sakura suspected he hadn't seen his feet in years. He took one look at her, or rather her glowing gaze, and scowled. You, there! A gloved hand jabbed her in her direction. Maiden, come with us at once. Atlas has need of you. Maiden. She already loathed that title. It made her sound like a damsel in distress, some flowery girl waiting in a tower to be rescued by a prince, hardly an almighty spell-slinging warrior capable of raining napalm and lightning down on her foes. Honestly, whoever coined that term wasn't right in the head. She'd love to have words with them. However, a typical Atlas. Duncan turned his head and spat upon the rickety dock. You come here and act like you own us. Make demands of us. Sucker laid a hand on his forearm, quelling him before he could do something truly reckless. That's right, the man sneered at him. Silence, dog. Your betters are speaking. Bull, actually. Duncan's smile took on an ugly edge. And by all means, call me that again. See what happens. The officer sputtered. You would raise a hand against the kingdom of Atlas? Nope. A crazed light burned in his silver eyes. Just you. A discontent murmur passed through her people. Sucker wondered when she'd started to think of them as such. Shaken off that thought, she pushed herself through them and offered the man her hand. There was no need to be rude. Maybe they might yet be persuaded to leave in peace. It was a faint hope. Yet she clung to it regardless. Sucker Harno, and you are? He didn't accept it at all, the utter bastard. It appears you have some manners after all, unlike the rest of these animals. The fat fellow preened like a proud peacock and smiled in what he had no doubt thought a dashing manner. Very well, I go by the name of Chase, Captain Chase, if you wish to know my rank. He puffed out his chest, and she found himself rather reminded of a pompous pigeon. Now then, enough dickering about. His brow furrowed. We've come all this way to retrieve you. Your powers are wasted among these peons. Everyone went mad. Wasted, you dare! She'll never go with you lot. You can't have her. She's our goddess. Sarker raised a hand, and reluctantly her faithful quailed. Goddess? Chase scoffed. She is no goddess, but a maiden. Are you truly that blind? Duncan went curiously still, his silver eyes narrowed to deadly slits of wrath. The only blind one here is you. She... Ha ha ha! Sucker clamped a hand over his mouth before he could disclose the rest of her abilities. Hush, quiet, not another word. In all fairness, she knew very little about Alice beyond what she'd heard through second-hand accounts. Some of it might be colored by Menagerie's perceptions, but this man wasn't making the best impression at the moment. She cocked her head to one side like a wary wolf, hair concealing a burning iris. The soldiers stole an anxious glance at her blazing orbs, as well they should. For a moment, there at the beginning, just a moment, she considered giving in to the captain's demands. Atlas was a large nation, and they might well have sick and ailing of their own. The healer in her heart wanted to help them, nay, help everyone she could, but to simply abandon Menagerie because this fat fool of a fop told her to. A rare knot of anger coiled in her stomach. I will go nowhere with you. She lifted her chin in defiance. My place is here. If you have sick or wounded, I would be happy to treat them, but you have no say in the matter. The captain made a grab for her hand, causing her to dart back out of his reach. Your talents are wasted here with these animals. She drew back, and his face turned a remarkable shade of puce. Enough! You will come with us, or you will be clapped in irons and dragged back to Atlas. Duncan absolutely hissed. Well, that simplified things, didn't it? Atlas, was it? Sucker's smile was just the wrong shade of viciousness. Get off my island. Duncan, see to it, would you kindly? It would be my pleasure. Her second drew his ancestral sword in a graceful flourish, revealing a scarlet blade red as blood for all eyes to see. The sheath he gripped in his offhand, ready to wield at a moment's notice. Wilt and blush shimmered in the light of the sun, eager for violence. The soldiers responded in kind, leveling their rifles. Duncan saw it and slipped into loose stances of his own, a crouched predator ready to charge. Now, a new voice drawled, shattering the tension like so much glass. There's no need for violence. Let us lower our weapons and speak as equals. Sucker rounded on the sound just in time to see someone disembark from the Atlas boat. The newcomer did not run, nor did they leap into the fray like a certain blonde she knew. They simply limped really, down the gangplank at a sedate pace, uncaring for the confusion they sowed in their wake. Some were baffled, others angry. Headmaster Oswald. Chase scowled at the approaching figure, his face gone pallid. I have this well in hand. There is no need for... You clearly do not, old friend. A strangely familiar cane tapped once upon the dock, silencing him. Stand aside. Remarkably, the man complied. Sarka felt something still in her soul at the sight of the newcomer, much like Captain Chase. This man wore the uniform of Atlas, unlike him. He wore it well, wiry where the captain was fast, tall where he was short. This Oswald carried himself with dignity and grace. His face was gaunt from age, framed by a well-trimmed beard, hair gone with hair gone white against the ravages of time. A single silver iris gleamed back at her, the other concealed by a worn navy eye patch. They did little to hide the scarring lurking beneath the cloth. Yet despite it, he stood proud and tall, even to rival even Duncan himself. His presence commanded respect, for even the soldiers straightened at the sight of them. More than one lowered their weapons and saluted on the spot. For all his presence, all things considered, he looked almost normal, all things considered, normal as can be, and yet there was something about him. Miss Harno, was it? He granted her a kindly smile. Might I have a word? She frowned. Aren't we doing that right now? Touché, Oswald surprised her with a low laugh. I had hoped we could speak alone. Duncan looked fit to pop a vein at that, but Sakura waved him down. It's all right. He won't hurt me. Nothing could be further from my mind, Oswald temporized. I dare say she could snap me in half if she so choose. Captain Chase brindled anew and tried to protest, but a glance from the older man quelled him once more. Sarkar sensed a story there. The portly fellow didn't seem keen on following orders, but this headmaster clearly had power over him. Whether that came from command or blackmail or perhaps something else entirely, she knew not, but it was certainly something. Oswald offered her his arm like a gentleman scholar. Shall we? Reluctantly, Sakura lopped her arm in his and allowed him to lead her away from the others. They withdrew a few paces down the beach, well away from the rest, yet still able to be seen by the rest. As she regarded the man with the cane, Sakura felt something stir inside her soul. She had never seen this man before in her life, yet something in her recognized him. The power within her stirred, and her eyes burst into flames of their own accord before she wrestled it back down. Naturally, the headmaster saw it. Everyone did. Rather than bray and bluster like the captain had, he seemed quietly bemused as she tugged her arm from his and stepped back. You are not a goddess. Someone who saw sense. Huzzah! Sakura didn't trust herself to words. Instead, she shook her head in mute agreement. As I had thought, his smile grew another inch. It seems we weren't mistaken after all. Which maiden are you then? Winter, fall, spring, perhaps? Summer. Her lips betrayed her, and she nearly went cross-eyed herself for the slip. Where had that come from? I see, he considered her. From Vakua, then. The last maiden must have thought quite highly of you. His words brought on a spark of anger, accompanied by a snarl. Sakura wasn't one to hold grudges, but she was fairly certain she hated her predecessor. Stupid old broad. She'd been so close to convincing everyone that she was a normal girl back then. Surely, given time, they would have come to understand she wasn't special. Her death made that impossible. Explaining her healing abilities and super strength were difficult enough, but burning ice and elements bursting from her whenever she lost her temper? Nope, not possible. In many ways, the last summer maiden had truly sealed her fate. But Oswald was awaiting an answer. Perhaps it was petty of her, but Sakura wanted to prove him wrong. He thought she was on good terms with the last maiden, or whatever the hell they were called. How little he knew. She'd enjoyed disabusing him of that lofty notion. She all but killed herself in front of me. Shock blanketed his face, and she took some small pleasure in it. I think she wanted to be rid of this power. Her hand rose, and she focused, summoning a small sphere of flame to her palm. I can see why. Shaka glowered at the ember, and it burned down to angry cinders. No one should have this kind of power. She nearly burned down Menagerie trying to control it. Sorrow flitted across his face, shadowed by another emotion she didn't quite recognize. I see. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Some are not prepared for this burden. It changes them. Sakura felt no need to dance around pleasantries. How do I get rid of it? Oswald's visible eye narrowed in distress. You cannot. Bullshit. There must be a way. The old sage flinched. Well, she pressed. Tell me. He looked away. It can only be passed on to another woman after death. Sakura's mouth clinked shut. Perhaps there was a way to No. She dismissed the notion almost immediately. Not happening. Even if she knew a way to trick her body into such a state, it was impossibly risky. The slightest miscalculation could very well kill her, and there would be no miracle to save her this time. So long as she lived, she would never be rid of this power. The thought saddened her, but only for a moment. With fresh resolve, she lifted her gaze. She just have to make it her own then. Thankfully, Oswald mistook her silence for something else. Rest assured, I mean you no harm. He braced his cane in the sand and laid a wrinkled hand on top it. There are those that wish otherwise. However, it simply isn't safe for you here. The notion alarmed her. And who are they? Another matter of for another time. Oswald temporized. Suffice to say, you are in great danger. A pink brow arched, and he hastened to explain. Not from Atlas, I assure you, despite the enthusiasm of Captain Chase. I assure you he has only the best intentions. Like me, he wants to protect you, but we cannot do so here. Menagerie is too exposed. Did they think her some helpless waif? She'd been powerful before that blasted hag cursed her with this gift. In time, she would be stronger still, much stronger. That wasn't arrogance on her part, it was simply the truth. She would train others, and when this strange enemy prepared, they would not be unprepared. I can protect myself, resolve hardened in her heart. These people need me. More than that, I'm doing good work here. I'm doing work here. And she flung an arm back towards the center of Menagerie, forcing him to follow with his gaze towards a series of white tents. The medical advancements we're making here will benefit the entire world. The world, or just the faunus. Sucker blinked at the sudden cynicism. What? Everyone, of course. Knowledge should be shared. They already know of you. His breath hovered at a low hiss. Word of your deeds have already spread to the four kingdoms. Many have taken notice. Faunas flock to your banner. More arrive by ship every week, though I'm sure you've noticed. Sarkar clenched her jaw, refusing to be abated by the words. Even if they were true, Menagerie was heaving with people. You have become a symbol, Sakura Haruno, whether you like it or not. You have enemies. They are already here. It won't be long before they strike at you. He was hiding something from her, something big, unbidden. Sakura recalled a warning spoken to her by the last summer maiden. Beware the man of many faces. This man certainly had one face, but for some reason the words stuck with her. The man of many faces. Who was that? What did that mean? She was delighted to find someone who understood that she wasn't a goddess, but in the same vein, she couldn't quite bring herself to trust Oswald. Not completely, not yet, perhaps not ever, not when she was dancing around the truth like this. He was a stranger to her, answers he might well have, but his presence brought on a host of questions she wasn't prepared to deal with right now. For now, she would do the only thing she could do. Then I will fight. Here at last, Oswald flung up his hands. You cannot. I can. Her forehead slammed against his, stunning the old man to send him reeling him back 3 paces. You don't know anything about me. Months of silent stress broke the surface. Oh, she understood now. He thought she was weak, that without the power of a maiden she was nothing. She couldn't take it anymore, not one bit of it. Either they thought her an invincible goddess or some weakling. No matter what she did, she couldn't seem to win. It wasn't fair. She just wanted to help people, play the good host, be the reasonable healer. And what did she have to show for it? Not a thing, nothing, no less than nothing. Scorn and derision. It wasn't fair at all. Her eyes blazed anew, and with them came the wind. Her feet briefly lifted from the floor before she mastered herself. High above, the skies began to darken. Someone was laughing, their voice struggling to be heard over the keening gale. It was a sharp, shrilling sound born of stress and hysteria. The cry of woman stressed beyond her limit. Naruto might have talked her down, walked her back from the edge. Kakashi would have scolded her or distracted her from his antics. Sasuke. Well, surely he could have done something to stop her, but they weren't here. She was alone. She had no one to trust, no one to rely on. Her temper, restrained for so long, exploded like a raging dragon. I have fought gods, madmen, and monsters. When Oswald retreated, Sakura stalked after him, eyes wild, stabbing her fingers into his chest. I have seen things that would make your blood run cold. I am trying to fix things, trying to help people, and yet time and time again, the universe keeps interfering. First Kaguya, then that maiden, now you. I don't care about this. She snapped her fingers, producing a vivid purple spark. For your precious Atlas, or my enemies, if anyone threaten what I'm trying to build here, then I'll crush them. I will stand. I will fight, with or without you. Oswald opened his mouth, and in a fit of pique, she gave him a shove. He stumbled back and fell to the sand, where he gaped up at her. Agog? Good. If he said one more word, she was going to thrash him besides. And if you think I'm dangerous. She leaned in, preparing her forehead to his with a snarl. You have no idea. She twisted the proverbial knife. Kakashi-sensei would run circles around you. Naruto and Sasuke. Ha! An angry smile twisted her lovely face. They'd make you cry. her piece said. The way where Kunoichi stomped a booted foot and tossed her long hair over one shoulder. Then she flounced back to the others. "We're done here," she hissed archly. "Thank you for your kind advice and the warning, but I think it's best you leave," Oswald shouted at her receding backside. "We're not finished, Miss Haruno." Blazing green eye appeared over her shoulder. "Yes, we are." Duncan saw her coming and broke away from Captain Chase, all but shouldering the ghastly man aside in his haste to reach her. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Having endured all manner of harsh looks and harsher words since he'd come here, the man had been teetering on the edge for quite some time. Witnessing her spell just now pushed him right over it. He stabbed a hand into his belt and tore something free. There was movement in the corner of Sakura's eye. She spied a familiar sphere in his right hand. Duncan must have seen it as well, because he pivoted with a roar, throwing himself forward. A gun barked once, a single shot gone wide, a sword flashed, a shriek filled the air. Duncan lowered his blade, spattering the docks with blood. It wasn't his own. Captain Chase stumbled backwards with a strange keening sound, eyes bulging almost comically as he clutched at the ruined stump of his wrist. His shoulder struck a nearby soldier, nearly knocking them off the dock altogether. The crowd, once baying for violence, had fallen eerily silent. No one moved, no one blinked, none dared to even breathe. A child's gasp she shattered the silence. "Goddess, I don't feel so good." Sakura knew that voice. Someone confirmed it with a gasp. "Tyrion's been shot." Everything dissolved into a blur. Sakura rounded on the sound and saw the poor boy, who must have crept closer when she wasn't looking, toppled down on the rickety pier, clutching at his chest with a look of complete and utter befuddlement on his face. His mouth worked wordlessly, unable to form words. She beheld the blood bubbling beneath his hands, staining the pale fabric of his shirt. As she looked on, he pitched backwards. Sakura's world didn't go red, it went crimson. "No!" She moved it, and her fist found flesh. "No, no!" Captain Chase folded in on himself with a dry wheeze, but she didn't even stop to see him fall. "No, no, no!" She was still babbling when her knees hit the deck before Tyrion's prone form, screaming as one hand pulsed with green light, shrieking as the other set about finding and extracting the bullet. He was so pale. A few folk crowded in as she worked. Sakura ignored them. Someone was speaking to her. She ignored them too. Someone tried to touch her shoulder, but she subsequently snarled them into silence. Ignored them. Eventually, the people of Menagerie stopped trying. She didn't care. She only had eyes for her patient. "You're all right. You're all right." She soothed the poor trembling boy. "Everything's going to be all right. Just focus on the sound of my voice." "It hurts." All she received was a miserable whimper. "Really hurts. I know." Sweat bedded on her brow. "Just stay with me." Time ceased to have any meaning for Sakura Haruno as the line between life and death blurred. She wasn't sure how much time passed after those words. How long did she spend there on her knees, hunched over little Tyrion callous, trying to stitch up his insides? Seconds, minutes, hours. Reality lurched back, and the boy lay on the deck, pale and quivering from blood loss, but alive, barely breathing, yet breathing nonetheless. She'd done all she could. The rest was up to him. She barked an order, and Duncan's team closed ranks around the boy, ferrying him away to safety. Her gaze rose and found the perpetrators, just in time for the man himself to bring his sheath down on the captain's head. You filthy cur! I'll see you hang for this!" Chase lost all sense of himself and clambered backwards, all but falling upon his pistol. He weaved it about like a flail. "You're all under arrest!" Oswald hastened in their side. "Captain, please come!" His gun barked again. Blood sprayed through the air, and this time Duncan didn't see fit to intervene. The headmaster pitched back, clutching his stomach. "I will not!" The captain brayed at them all, heedless of his approaching doom. "This is a military operation. You no longer have any authority here." To his men he gave but a single command. "Take the girl. She comes with us now, or I swear by the gods I will gun all of you down myself." Circa twitched. "Gods, you say?" Blood spattered the docks. It wasn't hers. Chase toppled backwards like a fallen elm, clutching his ruined nose. As one, the soldiers rounded on her. Safeties clicked off. A pink brow rose, recognizing the rifles for what they were. Her time in Menagerie had not been wasted. She'd asked questions and in turn learned a great deal. Guns were dangerous to a shinobi, to be true. To be sure, most knew precious little of them. Not so her. She was quite aware of their capabilities. Ranged weaponry was something to be avoided at all times, and this lot was outright trembling after her little display on the beach. If her temper hadn't been so frayed, she might have tried to talk them down. "I gave you a chance to leave." And this is how you repay me? The healer stood slowly, jerkingly, like a puppet severed from its strings. A nearby soldier barked at her. Don't move! You're not men! You're monsters! She staggered forward towards him, eyes glowering. Every last one of you! Her hand found his trembling weapon and squeezed, metal folded like tinfoil beneath her firm fingers, rendering the barrel a useless lump of scrap. The poor fellow recoiled with a startled cry, one that cut off abruptly as Sorcerer's fist found his chin. He collapsed like a house of cards. Sorcerer kicked his head once to make sure he wasn't faking. He stopped moving after that. Duncan! The swordsman stiffened at her glazing gaze, found not trusting himself to speak. Protect the others. He might have said something. She wasn't sure. Everything was distant, muted somehow. Everything save her unyielding rage. And now that you can't get your way, you resort to violence. She clicked her tongue in mild admonishment as he turned to face the rest. Your parents would be ashamed of you. No one moved. Well, come on then. She spread her arms, inviting them to react. Hit me, shoot me, give me a hug. I don't care anymore. It was too much. A soldier's fingers twitched. His gun barked. The others followed suit. Oswald groaned from the floor. You fools! Sharka scowled. A pale hand rose and intercepted each bullet with lazy grace, all but snatching them out of the air. 2, 4, 6. Firm fingers closed around the casings and squeezed, grinding them down to a fine red powder. She kept squeezing, soundly reveling in their startled expression as the now harmless dust drizzled from her grasp. All right, she hummed, watching the strange substance slip through her fingers. Let the record show that you're idiots, and don't blame me for this. His fist crashed down with sound and aplomb. The back half dock abruptly shattered underfoot. Even wounded as he was, Oswald managed to tumble to safety. The others weren't so fortunate, bereft of balance and unprepared for such a display. Several soldiers pitched backwards into the bay before they even knew what was happening. The water was deep and their armor heavy. Some drowned, others by dint of determination or just blind bloodied luck managed to thrash their way to shore. They found no safety there. Instead, by the time they made it to the shallows, it was too late. Sakura flicked her fingers, and a plume of smoke, frost burst from her to strike the placid blue waters, rendering them become an icy prison, entrapping them. Be good and stay put, she snarled. Of the 12, only 3 had managed to avoid the watery grave or icy dome. One of them drew down his weapon and surrendered. His comrades did not. More fool they. Sakura closed on them with fire and blood, whirling, twisting, never lingering in one place for too long, lest she find herself scythed down by enemy fire. She closed the distance quickly and finished what they started with brutal dispatch. Duncan covered the rest and careful to intercept any stray shots with his blade. Just like that, it was done. The soldiers slumped to join their captain. Oswald's jaw clicked open. What are you? Sakura spared the old man a scathing glance where he lay, her mind whirled, taking in his injury, gut wound, bleeding badly. Without medical treatment, he wouldn't last long. Must have been taken by surprise for his aura to fail like that. Or perhaps it was simply the captain's weapon. Maybe it was a semblance of some sort. She didn't know, didn't care. This was all his fault. Him and Captain Chase both. They should have stayed away. Even now, a small part of her wanted to heal them. Her fingers twisted, longing to close the wound before her. If she healed them, they'd just come after her again, but to just let them die. In the end, the choice was taken from her. Fire! Captain Chase ripped a radio from his belt and barked a frantic order into it. Fire on my position! Fire everything! Are you insane? Ha! He rounded on them, eyes wide and rolling with sheer terror. If Atlas cannot have you, no one can. Die with us, you filthy animals! Colette's knuckles barreled into his chin and laid him out flat. Too late. Miles away, the battleship's main gun barked. A frantic Sakura did the only thing she could. She lashed out. Lightning burst from her fingertips and arrowed across the water like a flung javelin. Like a heartbeat, not a heartbeat too soon. An awful crack split the sky, and she felt rather than saw the explosion that followed. Her lightning bolt knew no such mercy. Even as it split the shell, it kept going and struck the ship, effectively disabling it. Sakura recoiled, hissing in pain. Ow! She whined, half waving her stinging palms. That really hurt, damn it! No one answered. She dared look. She dared look back. Duncan had shepherded the civilians to safety the moment Chase started screaming, but friendly fire and shrapnel from the battleship had done to Oswald and Captain Chase and the soldiers what she would not. A score of lifeless bodies lay face in the thawing water, still and lifeless as the grave itself. Sucker tried not to look at them. In that at least she succeeded. She couldn't quite silence the pang of guilt that followed. So many lives cut short, all for their own foolishness. If word got out, she'd surely be blamed. Oh, she grimaced. That's not going to end well. But that still left the battleship dead in the bay, and she'd be damned if she let it get away. Forcing herself into a spring raced across the water in no time at all. She reached it. She gazed up at the looming mass, briefly at a loss. The vessel was large and stern and unyielding, a testament to the nation who had forged it. A normal human would have struggled to even scratch such a hull, just a bulk. But she wasn't normal now, was she? She was a maiden after all. Fine. She wanted the spectacle. She'd give them a spectacle. Green eyes burned with emerald flames. Smash! Metal yielded to a chakra-coated fist. With a ponderous groan, the vessel began to list to port. Soon enough, it would take on water. Unacceptable. Sarkar wasn't satisfied with simply sinking the ship. She dropped to her haunches, grabbed the metal bow of the ship with both hands, and heaved. Move! Damn you! Its hull buckled beneath her grasp, but she remained undaunted and lifted both arms high over her head. A colossal shadow fell over her. The weight was incredible, even for one such as her. Her body shrieked at her, demanding release, begging for her to stop. Her muscles burned, her legs trembling. She pushed past her limits, whirled and hurled. It then landed with a roar. An awful crush reached her ears as it struck the beach. To those within it, it was a death knell. To Sakura, it was sweet music. She trasped back across the water, wincing only slightly as her right shoulder protested. A quick pulse of healing chakra set that to rights. From there, it was a simple matter of opening the battleship like a tin can. Only then did she realize how many eyes were upon her. Peeling back the hull, she scowled at those within. Surrender would be a really good idea right about now. Poor bastards didn't need to be told twice. They threw down their weapons and groveled to her feet. Sakura grinned. Now that's more like it. Mistral flourished. It hadn't taken long to make a meaningful difference in the Grim ravaged continent, but what a difference it was. Grim were pushed back, defensive lines were formed, territories expanded by the day. Sasuke and new tribe did his bidding as best they could. Any who stepped out of the line or thought to take liberties within their charges were similarly slain. His ranks swelled with worshippers, and while he didn't encourage such behavior, neither could he manage to rid himself of them either, and so he endured it with the look of a man marching off to his own funeral, which is to say, not well. It was no such day, a blazing hot afternoon, when everything changed. "My lord, I have something for you," Sasuke grunted as he knelt in his peripheral vision, but didn't look away from the task at hand. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending whom you ask these days, Skatash had grown rather adept at interpreting their set grunts. She didn't budge. Blast her! He turned away from the yard and glanced at the exhausted girl sprawled out on her back before him. "That's enough training for today. Return to your tent. You need your rest." Riven raised her arms. "Tired. Don't want to walk. Carry me." Sasuke sighed. Such a needy daughter. She was, wasn't she? The thought should have alarmed him, but he'd long since grown inert to it, having two little ones following him about, reminding him of happier times, a pleasant era when he'd been blinded to the evils of the world. Had he not done the same with Itachi so long ago? They sought strength in a world where the strong ruled. He couldn't begrudge them that. Wherever Raven went, Crow was seldom far behind. But in this case, her twin was already sleeping off today's training. He didn't quite have his sister's stamina, not yet, but he would. In time, these two would be legendary. The thought pleased him. After tucking her in, he returned to his second. Skatacha immediately presented him with a gift. Here, Sasuke scowled at it, unable to fathom her intent. As she held it out for him, it looked like an ornament lamp burning a blue sphere in the middle. Why give him this? He had no need of such a thing. His eyes allowed him to see such fine even in the darkness. What need had he of a lamp? He said as such, "What is this?" "A gift." She pushed it into his hands. "You seek your friends. I have brought you the means by which to find them." "With a lamp?" "Nay," she clicked her tongue with mild annoyance. "This is a relic, one of knowledge." A memory tugged at him at their first meetings. "Earlier you said," she huffed. "I changed my mind." "Why?" he asked. "I'm dying." Such words did not startle him. He hadn't known her long enough to be invested in her continued existence. She was, like this land, a stranger to him. He still didn't like the idea of her passing on. It plucked at something deep inside him, something he refused to admit existed. Even now, it was his conscience. Can anything be done? Quite incurable, I'm afraid. She tapped one finger to her chest, just above her chest. "It's my heart, you see. I was told that I only had a year to live. That was 2 years ago." A small, bitter smile plucked at the corner of her mouth. "Frankly, it's a miracle I'm alive at that. I feel myself growing weaker every day. My end cannot be far off." She must have seen the questions in his eyes, because her placid expression turned stormily. "Do not pity me. I have no regrets." Sasuke felt himself run at that. Skathach had been useful to him. Dare he say pleasant she was. She did not fawn for or fret or fuss over him as most did, and that alone made a world of difference to a wayward warrior such as he. She certainly seemed to think he was more than what he claimed to be, but she'd not challenged him further. He recalled Itachi's illness and what little he'd seen of it. His beloved brother had perished gasping for air, choking on his blood. He did not envy Scathach such a fate. Hers might be worse. His consciousness pricked him. Sakura could help her, surely, couldn't she? But he had no way of knowing where she was, or if she'd follow him to this place of existence at all. "Her name is Jin," Scathach bulled on, red eyes piercing him like a lance. "She will have the answers you seek." Taking the lamp in his hand, Sasuke frowned. Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. He spoke the binding name. "Jin." Smoke poured from the relic. Something emerged. Sasuke's brow shot into his hairline. Not something, someone very large indeed, beautiful in blue, clad in dancing golden chains, and absolutely nothing else. She was a sight to behold, as rich blue eyes gleamed with secret knowledge, burning bright, even brighter than Naruto's own. He hadn't thought it possible. Full lips rogued by black quirked down at them in a smile, framed by waves of dark navy hair, and her arms to the heavens, and her arms. Full lips, ruffed by black, worked down at them in a smile, framed by waves of dark navy hair, and pointed ears almost elf-like in nature. With a languid sigh, the young woman raised her arms to the heavens and stretched until her back produced a pleasant pop. It did interesting things to her bosom. Much better. When she finally deigned to speak, her voice was a low, sensual purr. 100 years gives a girl such a kink in the neck, but what do we have here? She tilted her head to one side, regarding him as one might a particularly clever child. Sasuke wasn't sure he liked the comparison. No simple construct of energy. This she could think, reason. She saw them clearly and appeared intrigued by them. My, she drifted forward, defying gravity to recline in the very air itself. Has the dying girl finally entrusted someone with her secret? And a boy at that! Scathach did not flush. She was beyond such girlish ways. She did scowl, however. You shouldn't speak of a god as such. A god, he is not. Jin spoke, her head in a firm denial. There have only ever been two in this world, fondly. Someone who saw sense. Her next words dashed his hopes against the rocky shores of reality, although I can see why many might mistake him as such. A crooked smile curved at her dark lips. I'm sure the god of darkness would find this terribly amusing. The last of his goodwill evaporated like morning mist. You know me. I know that I know that you are a man with many sins. Her words riveted him, a man seeking to atone for the mistakes of his past. Oh yes, I know many things about you indeed. Those lovely blue eyes narrowed, becoming hued in thinly veiled pleasure. Your life is an open book to me, Sasuke Uchiha. You and your friends were known to me the moment you set foot in this world. Friends that you knew where they were. A number of hope sparked to life in Sasuke's soul, but he dared not kindle it. He sprout forward. How do I know you're telling the truth? Skepticism, and Jin granted him a benign smile. From you, how droll. Whatever would your beloved brother say? Did he not die for you? What was his name again? I believe it was Itachi. She barreled on, heedless of the hiss he gave. Such a dutiful sibling. He sacrificed everything for you, his reputation, his health, even his very life. Do not speak of Itachi. His sword howled free from its scabbard with narrow a sound. Its tapered tip found Jin's throat. She leaned forward and allowed it to pass through her flesh. There was no resistance, no blood, no reaction at all. Beyond the faintest ripple of smoke, she spoke on, unimpeded by the injury whatsoever. Why so serious? Her smile grew in the face of his confusion. You desire proof. I merely provided it. It was not my intention to provoke you. Oh, but she had. His world had gone red. Even now his right eye throbbed, longing to lash out, but he couldn't. To slay Jin, assuming he could even harm an ethereal being, would deny him the answers. With a supreme effort of will, he drew his blade back and sheathed it. She said, you can answer my questions. Then you know what I seek. I do, but I cannot speak of the future, she warned him. Merely the present and the past. 3 questions remain this era. Ask what you will. Sasuke took a deep breath to steady himself. Then he spoke. Where are they? Previews. Long live the god of light. Long live the hero of Bell. Much to his chagrin, everyone took up the cry. Long live the new headmaster. Damn it. So much for keeping quiet. Huh? Naruto balked, catching up. Me? Headmaster? Earnest eyes fell upon him. You saved us. I can think of no one stronger. Maria sniggered softly, shoulders trembling with mirth. Naruto absolutely twitched. Kakashi whistled sharply. It was the sound of mercy. All right, he laughed, a breath fogging into the brisk winter air. That was a good run. You've earned yourself a breather. Be up in 10. Willow's knee collapsed to the ground with a cry, torn somewhere between a sob and a snarl. Cinder was only a heart behind. She took some petty pride in that, and sneered at her. Young though she was a stubborn girl. One used the rigors of running and fending for herself in the slums. Willow's knee was not. She had lived in a pampered life, but she was getting past that. She'd gotten better, faster, stronger. It only cost her pride. Willow dove at him. He stepped aside, pushed a hand between her shoulder, and left her sprawling in the yard. Kakashi clapped slowly. Well done. You nearly caught me that time. Cinder flopped to the ground. I hate you so much. Oh dear, did I say 10? I meant 5. Willow was a Schnee, and Schnee women were determined. She was just a girl now. When she was older, she was going to court this man. This was a battle not even Nicholas could save him from. Cinder may have taken a place to his side, but she was younger. She didn't understand. She never would. Cinder stood first. Kakashi beamed at her. That's my girl. Willow glowered at the young girl in naked envy. Some people needed to die. That was just the way of the world. Nothing personal. Kakashi hummed. That's a big grim. Sasuke smiled. Finally, a challenge. Sakura closed her blazing eyes and reached out with her newfound power. Inhaled, exhaled, in, out, in, out. Flames flickered from her closed eyelids. Hers was the power of the seasons, but also the elements. She'd done her homework. She could do this. She would do this. If not for her, then for the poor people that had taken her in. There, she could feel it, melding her chakra and magic together. She pushed. Kali tilted her head. What are you doing? Expanded the line. Quiet, please. Oh, that sounds great. What? And the water erupted. End of chapter 6.